I'm here with Josh Corcoran, producer for two new books coming out from Cubicle and 7, Hammer and Anvil and Mortar and Pestle. And these are part of the Crafting and Alchemy Kickstarter, which has been funded, yes?
Yep, fully funded.
Ready to go?
On the way to fulfillment now.
All right. So for those of us who don't know all the roles involved in publishing a book, what specifically does a producer do in a book like this?
Yeah, so as a producer, my responsibility comes in initially at sort of pitching a book. So I pitched the original Crafting Alchemy books, and I then plot out how those books are going to lay out, what content goes into them, and then I go and recruit a team of writers and artists using in-house people as well as freelancers to put together the semblance of the book. The majority of my work is about editing a review. It's about outlining stuff. It's about a lot of coordinating and sort of setting out the outlines for where this book is going to go. So we've got a very diverse team of writers and artists, graphics designers and editors who are working on this book, who are all listed, going to be in the credits of every book, and all work their magic in order to make this book a physical product.
Great. I didn't know that. It sounds like, from what little I know about publishing, it sounds like an editor-in-chief or an editor job, but more like combined with kind of a vision and direction.
Yeah, we've got, there's a lot of responsibilities that go on with it, but it's a lot of fun. I get to be the ideas guy and then coordinator.
Cool. And this one, I believe, is a little bit like some of your other Kickstarters, other Cubicle 7 Kickstarters, where there's more content for pledge levels. Is that right? Do I have that right?
Yep, that's correct. We've managed to unlock brand new systems that we're adding into both books. We've added in new add-ons to your custom equipment in Hammer and Anvil, as well as new magic items. And for Mortar and Pestle, we've unlocked expanded rules for monster hunting, as well as additional potions.
Gotta say that, yeah, this is something I really like about Cubicle 7's Kickstarters. It's cool to get pledge levels where you get some extra swag or something, or an alternate cover of the book. But hey, I'm an RPG nerd, and if you tell me more and cooler content the more you pledge, I am on that hook. I'm a fish on that hook. I think that's really cool. So Josh is going to tell us about these two books that are part of this one Kickstarter, and we'll start with Hammer and Anvil. Can you just tell us a little bit about what's in the book at a high level?
Yeah, absolutely. So Hammer and Anvil is our book dedicated to equipment crafting and magic item enchanting. It's just chock full of all the tools and rules that you would need to create new custom gear. So it's all about fulfilling that ideal vision of who your character is. If you're playing as an assassin who's using elite weapons that they've got set up to deploy poisons, or if you just want bigger and wider armor for your orc to survive on the battlefield, everything that you've got in your mind for your character, you'll be able to achieve with Hammer and Anvil.
Nice.
It's been really fun to sort of flesh out what makes every character tick with these sets of equipment.
Yeah, and I gather, well, you mentioned new rules, so it's more than just flavor, because I can already do that in, say, 5e. Right? I can say, oh, sure, I can tell a player, I'm a what do you call it, forever DM, forever GM, so I always think from the running the game point of view, but I can tell the player, yeah, sure, you can have your logo on your armor. You go into town, and I don't know, I'll just make this up because I have to, because 5e leaves gaps, which we'll talk about. Yeah, I can say you pay an artisan such and so gold, and yeah, you have a logo, but that doesn't really add any flavor to the mechanics. It's just flavor to the role play, right? This supplement actually allows me to. That's not a great example because I don't know what a logo would do, but this supplement allows me, the player, right? If I'm the player, I can actually kind of come up with what those mechanics might be.
Yeah, absolutely. We have designed from the ground up that these equipment crafting rules are here to reflect that ideal vision of your character. So if it's like mechanical gadgets and doodads you want to add on to your gear, it's not just a simple, oh, this is a regular crossbow, but it's a clockwork crossbow. It's like, no, that's going to have some actual mechanical impact. If it removes your reloading properties or stuff going on with your weapons.
Oh, nice.
The idea of like super awesome mega forging your sword by folding it 1,000 times over to get the best steel ever. Well, now you actually get a number that goes with that on your stat sheet, And it'll be a combination of like picking out being like, oh, I'd really love my regular longsword, but it deals a D10 instead of a D8. It'll be as simple as stuff like that, but also adding in new extra features, new extra properties, like those special rules that go with the lances or the nets and stuff like that. It's new special rules to cover new weapon types in that sense.
That's cool. And the forever DM part of me kind of likes the idea of taking the burden off of me to come up with these nifty things to give players. That's something that really stood out when I first read about this. It's like I'm so tired of just having to pull all this stuff out of thin air for people and hope that they like it. I have had players complain, you don't give us enough magic items, you don't give us enough cool items. And then I understand that complaint, but then I'm like, oh man, all of a sudden I feel on the spot to produce something cool. In this case, with this book, they could do that. They could decide what they thought was cool. And hopefully I can trust, which is another question I have, I can trust the mechanics will be balanced, because I don't honestly trust myself to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was a lingering idea with me when I was, first outlining and getting this book underway. I was coming up to a big period of time between like big bad guys in my campaign where I was running for my players, and the players were doing that whole, okay, we know who the next big bad guy is, but we want to be your own. Let's go to the nearby magic item shop and see what he has. And it's like, now I've got to have a magic item shop full. That thing's got to be stuck, and the players are going to want it. So I got to guess what they want ahead of time, and it can be hit or miss. I might bet that the fighter who always uses great swords, has always wanted great swords, has only ever used great swords, might want a better great sword. But if they actually turned around and were like, "Oh, I was really hoping to get a cool lance as my next cool power," it's just like, that's not something you can always predict for. So being able to hand over that vision of what the player character wants to be doing in the big bad fight to them, give them the rewards that they need to do it. Give them instead of a chest that's full of magic items, give them a chest that's full of the pieces to make magic items. And then let them go away and try and make what they want themselves and figure it out for themselves what they want. That's a fun experience that we've really enjoyed on the playtesting side here.
Yeah, that's really cool. For a certain type of player too, that just sounds like opening up the candy store and just letting them come in and load up. I've had players like that. I had a player who came to the game saying, hey, I wrote this 1-page idea for an item that I wanted that's a magic item. Surprise, surprise. It seemed really OP to me. And we had to have a conversation about
Weird.
Yeah. We had to have a conversation about, okay, what are you expecting out of this? I don't feel like I can allow this at level 1, that you're carrying this around. So again, I like the idea that with a supplement like this, instead, I could give that person the opportunity, but then I also, honestly, I'm not the bad guy making impromptu rulings based on how they feel to me, but there's a system to hopefully keep that in balance. Actually, that makes me think of a new question. What is level taken into account? Like in what way might level be taken into account? So if I'm a level 1 player, presumably I cannot craft myself a magic item that is totally out of proportion to level 1.
Yeah. No, that's a sort of thing that we definitely have had to, I don't want to say struggle with, but that's always been a design consideration from the beginning, because in a weird way, Core 5e doesn't limit what magic items you can get. You can find a legendary artifact in the first room of the first dungeon, and that's just how the game can rock sometimes. So we don't want to go flat out introducing new barriers where there weren't ones that exist. And there is a fun game out there where your level 1 party finds the dangerous magic item on level 1. So we don't want to deny that to people. But when it comes to walking out of the gate and coming up with new powerful magic items that could upset some of the inter-party balance, we did implement some choices there for how that's going to be implemented. So in Life I Lived, we introduced some new rules, some stuff we're making sure everyone has access to here in the Crafting Alchemy books, where you have to complete extended tests over a period of time in order to make your magic items. So your skills in your different tools and your different proficiencies are going to factor into how good equipment you can make early on.
Okay.
So if you have this really cool custom piece of non-magical equipment, like this super cool, like extendo suit of armor that you really want to make, that's cool. That's a really cool piece of equipment. And we're not going to cap a level at which you can do that. But if you don't have a high enough skill and modifier, you might end up with a really flawed design that might be able to do what you're looking for, but it will come with a lot of drawbacks.
Oh, interesting.
And there's no promises that it'll work properly when you try it out.
Okay, that's interesting. And that brings another thing that I like a lot in games. It's a little bit of a wild card / push your luck mechanic. I'm a big fan of, decks of many things and things like that for that reason. So in 5e, as it stands, rules as written crafting is, to me, a little weird. I find it a little convoluted and honestly not fun. It's like you have to have the correct kit. So there isn't a crafting skill anymore like I was used to in earlier editions, especially third. My favorite because I like slight crunch. It just makes it takes away the vagueness. And this is something, by the way, sidebars, this is something I like about these Cubicle 7 5e products is they seem to fill in things that 5th edition leaves open. And 5th edition has this kind of delightful, hey, DM, you get to make it up. But in my mind as a DM, I get uncomfortable because it's like, oh, okay, let me just make a house rule on the spot that has never been play tested, and I don't know if it's balanced or not. Which is something I like about these supplements, and I especially like that about the crafting thing. But I do wonder, since there isn't any crafting skill, instead we have this proficiency bonus adding stuff from our kits that we get in 5e. How does that factor into these books? Hammer and Anvil and Crafting and Alchemy. You mentioned that players would use a skill to craft an item, to make several checks to craft an item. What skill are they actually using?
Yeah, so we have decided that we aren't going to be in the mundane crafting. We aren't going to, break convention that much with 5e, but we're going to try and give as much clear instruction for what tools do and don't work with that. So we've got specific tool proficiencies are going to be called out. So if you're doing like weapon crafting or armor crafting or shield making, it'll be called out that you'll be using smith's tools by and large. So anyone who in their background has obtained smith's tools or has gotten proficiency in them from something going on in their campaign can use that there. But we additionally call out that there's going to be a lot of other places and a lot of other materials that you can make weapons and stuff out of that'll use different materials. So if you're using some sort of fancy elven glass weaponry, you might be able to use glass blowers tools. Or if you're out in the wilderness and trying to survive on your own, you might be able to use, you might be using different tools for using bone or for using other sorts of materials. Wood carvers tools for bows and crossbows, or tinker's tools if you're doing something particularly mechanical. So we've given a lot of flexibility to be able to use different tools that you are proficient with to try and make weapons.
Oh, very nice. Okay. So without revealing more than you can, because the book's not out yet, I don't know how much you can tell us, but I'll put it in a better way for me. For my purposes, revealing as much as you're allowed to, can you take us through, just at a high level, what that extended check would look like? Say I want to make spiky armor that, I don't know, maybe I can body slam someone with it and it does some piercing damage. Does that sound like something I could make?
Yeah, absolutely. We've specifically got something in mind for that kind of scenario.
Sure.
So if you've got, if you're, for argument's sake, trying to make a sort of like metal medium armor, you can go through and you would pick out, you buy the materials that you need to do it. Usually you'd spend a flat amount of gold, or maybe you've got other pieces of equipment that you want to improve already in order to make that. Mm-hmm. What you do is, you'd spend a downtime activity, which usually lasts about 1 week, reintroducing some of the rules that we first introduced in A Life Well Lived. But in a period of downtime, you'll be able to dedicate this to adding in spikes on top of existing armor or making new spiky armor. During that time, you would make 3 strength or dexterity blacksmith's tools tests or smith's tools. And depending on the results that you get, the better results that you get, past whatever crafting DC is set by the total number of like properties you're adding to it. So if you wanted to be a spiky armor, you wanted to be cushioned, you wanted to have weapon mounts, you wanted to have a cape, you wanted to have a few extra like branded logos on it. Those all add to the complexity of this item. And the higher that DC goes, the higher it is, the harder it's going to be in order to make it. If you manage to exceed your extended test results, then you've successfully crafted the armor and you've got a brand new set of spiky, luxurious armor that you can body slam people with.
Nice.
Uh,
And it'll do
the
my
better
piercing damage?
it will definitely do piercing damage.
How do we know how much piercing damage?
We've got rules in the case of spiky armor. We've got rules for specifically how much spiky damage you do whenever you slam into someone, and for how much, how long you keep them grappled for. You've got them with a bear hug. How effective your spikes are.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so are you saying that if I've got them grappled and I'm in the spiky armor, then if they're still grappled on my next turn, I can attack them again with the spikes?
Yeah, you've got them in a bear hug. They are not going anywhere. You're spiked.
Just kind of squeeze them in and roll for damage again if I hit.
Yeah, it's a really fun piece of kit. We've tried to figure out every time we were in the room trying to test the limits of what we could do with this crafting system, we kept trying to think, what's the coolest thing I can't do right now?
Oh, nice. What's one of the coolest ideas that came up during the playtesting or the development for, say, armor?
So for the armor system, the thing that we struggled with the most was that armor in D&D is a single number on your character.
Yeah.
2 if you decide to include encumbrance. And we decided that we need to try to figure out sort of interesting add-ons that you can include with it. So we've got this coming in at 2 different angles. You've got either your extra features, which are sort of like design quirks that you can add into it. Of that, my favorites are definitely a tie between the springy trait that you can add to your armor or the cape trait that you can add to your armor. Cape trait, you get to add a cape. That's it. It's fantastic. The springy trait might be a little bit more sincere in that it gives you an extra, it adds 10 feet onto all of your jump distances. So if you've got characters walking around who's trying to get access to higher ledges in order to get to elevations, or you got a ranger who's trying to specialize into getting line of sight, or you've got a particularly stealthy party who are trying to get into the enemy base in the dead of night. You can use your spring. You can equip your entire party with your springy set of armor, and you can all vault over. This is one particular wall that you're able to get past.
Cool. So it sounds like I'm getting the impression that I can come up with ideas which may or may not already have sort of prefab components for me. If they're not there, I guess I have 2 questions. First of all, it sounds like from what you're saying, if I'm having trouble coming up with ideas as a player, there's a sense in which I could just peruse the Hammer and Anvil book and find ideas. Like, oh, I put this piece with this piece with you give me the pieces and I can think of ways to put them together. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. That's the experience that we designed for first, was, that kid in the candy shop that you were talking about. Ogling at all my options.
Yeah, right. I'm going to the bulk bins and I want to put the Smarties with the chocolates.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. I got to try that. But also then, is there a dynamic whereby I've got an idea that isn't covered by the components that are already in the book? Does the system accommodate that?
Yeah, so we've got a fairly robust set of rules here that cover, that give different modifiers towards how difficult it is to craft stuff. And we say that, if you're doing a change that's of this type, which would be adding in all those extra sort of trick components of those extra properties that you add to your armor, that all affects the complexity of the design. And if you come up with a feature and your GM says, yeah, that's a cool feature that isn't covered, then all you need to do is adjust the DC like you would for any other test. And that still works with our new system.
Okay.
And then if you've got the other side of the features that you can add on, which is changing up the materials you're making your armor out of, or the stuff that you're adding to your armor. So if you find dragon scales that you want to add onto it, or you find treant bark that you want to add into your shields, whatever, that all affects the goal for this, the goal number that you have to try and exceed on your extended test. So there's 2 different levers that you can play around with as player and GM. If you've got stuff that isn't covered, then you've got a system in place to be able to improvise your own stuff that isn't covered by what we've got.
Okay, cool. All right, let me try to put you on the spot. See if I can stump the system. Probably not.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
But for fun, let's try. Let's say I want to have armor that has carefully placed masterwork, say mirrors on it that blind my opponent if they look right at it. So if they're in melee, there's no facing in D&D, so I can't apply a facing rule. They're facing the armor. Yeah. But let's say they're within a certain range, they have a chance of getting blinded. Can I do that with this system?
That is That is not something we have a specific trait for, but that is absolutely, if you were a player sitting at my table, I'd say that's pretty comparable to either the stunning trait that you can get by distracting people, with how shiny stuff is, or that might be something similar to like how you want to obscure yourself with some other stealthy stuff. And so if you wanted the effects to be in line with one of those that's already there, then we would change up the wording to match that. Or we'd come up with a DC we'd come up with the change to the DC that was pretty comparable to those.
Okay. So I was thinking that it would have the effect of just for until the end of my next round, say that opponent is blinded, meaning their hits, how does this go? Attacks to hit them at our advantage, but their attacks are at disadvantage. That's I
reckon we've got things set up in our different crafting systems. Set that up to be about, you'd increase your DC by 3 or 4, and then that factors into your extended test that you make at the end of this to see how complicated it is to make.
Okay, so where I don't have the specific examples, I still have kind of principles that are outlined that I can fall back on. It sounds
exactly.
Or some model that you can model it after.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got an extensive set of guides and ranges for GMs to figure out, okay, if your player's at this level, here's what an easy DC goal would look like. Here's what a difficult DC and goal would look like, and moderate for each of the different tiers of gameplay. So that way you've got a good estimate to range. Be like, it's probably going to be pretty easy, or it's going to be difficult. Then I can reliably predict then from that table a suitable DC that would work for that. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So very different than if someone asked me to do that in 5e. I want to make this mirror blinding armor, which now I really want to do. I feel like that's a cool idea. I would just be maybe I'm impressed with myself. This sounds egotistical. Let's just say it's some cool idea like that. I don't want to pat myself on the back that I'm impressed with as a DM. I get this kind of like conflicted, like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, but I'm also heartbroken because I have no idea how to do this. In 5e, like it sounds like there's enough here where I don't need to feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got plenty of like sections there, little boxes in there talking directly at the GM, saying that, look, here's some scenarios like this that can come up. Here's how you can modify what we have here to suit what you'd need.
Right. Which, in a review, when we have the product, it's not to market yet. So I have no review version. We would show that. We'd show a picture, like, here's a chart. But you seem confident that those things are in there. So I'm persuaded.
We're really confident about how the crafting sections come together.
Yeah, so it seems like you're ready for that type of question. What about this? What about that?
I'm about to answer with our internal testers. We are really looking forward to sending out the equipment crafting to our Kickstarter backers. We're more or less going to be sending it out and saying, hey, everyone, here's some rules. Try and break them, please.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that'll be like a pre-release phase then. Will be some.
Yeah. So we're always eager. Yeah, absolutely. We're always eager to give our Kickstarter backers early access to stuff as soon as we can. We obviously do enough kicking the tires here to make sure that it's in a pretty robust shape as is.
Yeah.
But there's no substitute for having 1,000 dice rolls done.
Right. That's great too. That also gives me confidence in a product like that. It does. I was just having a conversation with a colleague yesterday about how some of the trend, it's more in the video game world, maybe. I just think it's cool to see more independent publishers involving people in playtests and really putting forth a good faith effort to do that. That's a nice thing to see that I like about that segment.
Yeah, we love to get people involved in giving their feedback as early as possible.
Yeah.
As soon as we get them a good game to start adding to their table, the better.
Yeah, and we are obsessive nerds. We like to be in on it. We like, at least somebody heard my little comic book guy complain about, I love this book, but this was the worst part of the system ever. Like, we're nerds. We love that someone will listen to that.
Yeah, I don't know how you got that audio recording of me, but
you actually take on. I feel like when I go into that mode and catch myself, I feel like my voice almost takes on comic book guy a little bit. You start talking like this.
It possesses me sometimes.
Yeah, we can't help it. Is there anything else you want to tell us about Hammer and Anvil? We're going to move on and talk about crafting and alchemy next. Anything we didn't cover?
I'll give a very, very brief overview of the other back half of the book. I know we've gotten engrossed a bit But I will just say, that our magic item enchanting, we're aiming for that to be all about focusing on giving you're taking away that anxiety over trying to pitch the right magic item to your players, but instead give them the tools that they can create the magic item that they want. We're going to have magic items that you can apply to any of your custom equipment. So for that, we've tried to not define that, if you want this fire sword enchantment, it doesn't technically need to be a sword. It can be anything that deals slashing damage or piercing damage. So it's like, this cool saber that I created in the custom weapon system that isn't included in the core rules. Well, I can still make this magical. I can go and enchant this with cool new stuff. So that way my awesome handcrafted mega sword is now even cooler.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. While we're talking too, it occurs to me that a DM could even use this to create some interesting magic item and not worry so much about the balance. If I approach it as, okay, maybe the BBEG in this campaign made this thing, I could even make the tests for them to make it and see if they can do it, if it's reasonable. It kind of gives me something to work with even.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about this inside, and that it's one of the Kickstarter add-ons that we've added on was a deck of magic items and a deck of potions then to go with it. And we're going to be including things like the reference material for the crafting instructions for all those different magic items, but they're just really useful pieces of treasure. But even if you don't fully buy into the whole equipment crafting or spending a session, customizing your equipment and everyone gearing up, that you've still got 100 new magic items that you're going to be adding into this.
Yeah.
That's going to be a really interesting, really useful asset for GMs to use.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, 5e famously, whether it's a valid critique or not, a pretty common one is that it really doesn't like magic items a lot. They're there. They're not so integral to the game, the way that it's written. So for people that really do like magic items, I could totally see that deck of items, deck of potions. And that's another DM fatigue that I had. And once again, I'm sort of mid-level grognard, like 3rd edition. I loved almost anything the players wanted to do. Yeah, we'd have to stop and look it up, but it was there. And it felt better to me than having to just pull something out of thin air and hope that it was balanced and hope that it was okay. And the same is true of magic items. I certainly like that even as a DM that, here's more of a palette I can choose from. I love supplements that do that because I feel a little bit hogtied by what I've got in the DMG.
Yep. Those big random loot generator tables are really, I don't want to say very restrictive, but they're prescriptive. It's probably the best way.
They are. That's a good way to put it. They're there, but nothing really inspires me either. That's a bit extreme. Very few things inspire me the way that they used to in older DMGs. And you could just look through and flip through the magic items and think, oh, that's neat. I want to use that.
Yeah, exactly. And we're hoping that, as a GM, you'll be able to take a look at the loot box in your dungeon. You can take out, the items that you've hoped that your players are going to like, and instead you're going to add in 5 or 6 different ingredients, and the players are going to be like, "Oh my god, how am I going to use this? Will I use it to make plate my armor in silver to make me resistant to demons, or am I going to use that silver as a component to enchant a new amulet of truth, or is it going to, all the different pieces that you could need that the players are going to get excited about every time they open up a chest."
And not only is that delightful, but it also gives someone with min-maxing tendencies that's gear-oriented something to play with to occupy that has been play-tested and hopefully won't break the game.
Exactly. And we're hoping that the way that this will fit into any given GM session is that because it fits into a downtime slot, that because everyone's got sort of a dedicated couple of downtime activities that you can get in Hammer Anvil, more that you'll get in Mortar Pestle. And if you've got a life well lived, it fits into those same downtime activities there. So if you've got characters who want to spend their time, if you've already got a life well lived because they're all into their role-playing session, you can still hand the min-maxer their downtime activities to be like, here's your gear. Here's how you can make yourself the best there ever was. Yeah. I'm engrossed and I'm into this session, the same one, this shopping episode. I'm still into this. The same episode where everyone is off, socializing.
Sure, and of course your rogue is trying to steal stuff from the marketplace and get away with it.
Exactly.
uh, cool. Let's talk about mortar and pestle then. I had to
Yeah,
check and make
absolutely.
sure that I'm always just totally paranoid. I'm going to reverse them and say pestle and mortar. I don't know why I would say that. I always hear it mortar and pestle. Let's talk about
Yeah,
that.
that's been a debate in the office over which way it's supposed to go.
Well, let's see. They're alphabetical, mortar and pestle. That's one argument. But also, I've just never heard any human being say pestle and mortar. That would just be weird, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't roll. Mortar and pestle sits with me, so I think I got the last vote on that one.
Yeah, you get the followed by the plosive. Just sets it up and then it fires. Like a weapon. I don't know. This is D&D. It's all right to make violent metaphors, I guess. So tell us about mortar and pestle. What's the unique niftiness in there?
So Mortar and Pestle is a book dedicated to potions, poisons, explosives, and everything surrounding alchemy. We had, in our head, we had two different archetypes for characters in mind. You know, that wizard character who'd be often planting their items and studying away in their libraries, and you'd have that sort of more naturalistic character like druid who might be wanting to brew potions to help support the whole party. And so we felt that there was enough going on in this book that it needed to be a separate volume. So Mortar and Pestle is just fully dedicated to everything around potion brewing, be it searching for, finding, and harvesting ingredients, or be it refining and brewing potions, to cultivating a magical garden to be able to further grow more potions or to be able to spend an awful lot of time with outside of your base. And then we've got a collection of characters and customers and shopkeepers to be able to sell all the ingredients and potions that your characters might need.
Oh, nice. When you say magical garden, my dumb brain, first of all, I get what you're saying, but my dumb brain also jumps off into all these different possibilities. Like, okay, so presumably in our magical garden, we're brewing things like magical deadly nightshade or whatever it is that we need to make our alchemical creations. But, could we also have like a Feed Me Seymour plant in there that talks and is a monster? That's not really alchemy, though, so maybe not.
Yeah, so we've got the magical garden sort of came in as a sort of two-part sort of solution, right? Is that if you've got your wizard who's like cultivating their laboratory, it's inside of their tower, we also want you to be able to facilitate, what if this really cool magical plant that I found on my adventure, what if I just took it back and started making more of them? It's like, okay, so that's a fun thing. If you've got like the rare magical plant that is able to be used for making healing potions, what does it mean for your character to be able to go back home and start making healing potions more readily accessible to their community? There's really interesting stories that can come from what your character brings back and starts to grow on their downtime.
Okay, so could that, not that that's important, but I'm curious now, could that be accommodated if I had like a Venus flytrap that could talk and hang out in the garden?
Absolutely. If you have come across a plant that can grow, a plant that grows and can talk, that you can absolutely, hopefully, transplant it back to your garden. Assuming you are not traveling too far away.
Is there any kind of, I guess what I'm really thinking is there any kind of mechanical system that would say, I want to ring the garden in these things so that they bite anything that comes near it to protect it? Does that go outside? I mean, it's not alchemy, right? So it probably goes outside the scope of the book, but I'm curious.
So we do have a lot of garden features inside of this that flesh out the garden as its own system. So even if you interact with nothing else in Mortar and Pestle, even if you weren't that into potions, poisons, or whatever, you've still got this cool thing that you can attach outside your base. And it's filled with all sorts of interesting things like a dovecot that you can send messages back and forth to different NPCs. There's like an outdoor gym where your fighter can exercise whilst they're in between adventures and train up. We've got all these different like druidic groves, all these other features that let you like dedicate time to what feels like sort of like this ground outside of your keep. Got features in there that attract in monsters. So if you've got this sort of hollow little grove that your druid can sort of go and spend time with, they might end up attracting little critters, or they might attract some bigger critters into the garden whilst they're meditating.
All right. So I might reskin the critter as one that can't move because it's a plant and otherwise does what it does.
Or absolutely, you could replace the boundary fence of your lawn with like flower beds and instead just plant the plants you're looking for. And it's not a plant that you decide to harvest every season, but it's one that you keep there because anyone that goes near it ends up getting
might get chomped.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. I like that these wacky ideas that I'm just coming up with while we're talking, none of these are throwing you. Like there's some way to do it. And it doesn't sound like it's
absolutely
difficult or doing too many backflips either. Sounds like there's some way to make it fit in there.
Yeah, no, we've definitely tried to come up with as comprehensive a system as we can. But again, as with Hammer Anvil and as with a lot of our books, we try and make sure that the GM reading this sort of gets the structure we're going for.
Right.
So that way, even in the edge cases where we haven't covered it, you've got the tools you need to adapt that to your specific situation.
Yeah. Right. And I don't mean to focus on the stump the system questions. It's only a torture test. Yes, it's only a torture test, and it's a great answer is like, yeah, it's doable. You might have to figure out a little bit, but it's doable. Again, that's a far better answer than how do I do that with rules as written in 5e. So it's better to me than the answer I get in 5e, which is like, hey, friend dungeon master, you figure it out. It's your game. It's kind of like when I'm very surly about this, as you may have noticed, maybe unreasonably so, but I do not like it when 5e leaves me holding the bag. I've said this in a lot of my videos before too, so some of my regular viewers would be familiar with this axe that I tend to grind a lot. But I personally feel that the system, it comes right up at the edge of kind of a medium verging high crunch level, but doesn't go all the way. So it implies a lot of crunch that I then have to supply as the DM, where it doesn't really flesh it out.
And we found that in a few cases with all of our 5e titles. That's what we always try and fulfill. We can fill in a missing gap.
Well, and that's the good thing about it, is that it does leave openness for that. It leaves openness for third-party suppliers to come in and propose a solution. And then the upside, see, I can not be surly about it, because the upside is if there's multiple solutions, I can choose one that I like the look of. I'm not stuck with super gritty rules as written.
Exactly.
If I had a player using Mortar and Pestle to make healing potions all the time, is that game breaking? Do I just hit them with more encounters? Does it affect the action economy or the adventuring day kind of economy?
So we've looked at that's an important question. How does this
a while to get to?
Very good. But that's an important question. Is how does this affect the core cycle? How does this affect the dungeons I'm already running? Do they have to incorporate new potions being added in? Mm-hmm. And long story short, I don't think this is going to have a tremendously large. I don't think it's going to have a big detrimental impact to how things are balanced. Currently, instead of dedicating a whole downtime activity, which would be a whole week to making individual potions, instead make potions as part of a long rest. Mm-hmm. Which means that you're already incorporating it into the cycles that you have going on in your dungeons. So if you've got a party who's going through a large dungeon and they have to back out and take a long rest at some point, you know that they're already going to do some amount of stocking up anyway.
Right.
You just need to accommodate that they are going to brew up a few extra potions using ingredients they've found in the dungeon so far.
Okay.
So you can, as a GM, set up what kind of different tools you do or don't want them to have access to.
Oh, okay.
Alternatively, players who are knowing in advance that they're going into a difficult scenario might go to an alchemist shop and buy up a bunch of ingredients ahead of time.
Right.
They might want to brew the potions before they go onto an adventure, at which point they can spend a whole downtime activity just batch brewing potions in order to get ready for their adventure.
Okay. And then they would have to have enough. I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
They actually have to have things that are a little harder to come by in a tabletop RPG as well, like glassware and vials and things like that, and not just one ingredient but several, and a kit and all these things. Yeah, so I think I can pick out a couple of parts to that answer, and tell me if I've got you right. One part of the answer is that by default, it's pretty balanced because it's going to take somebody a week to brew that potion. But so first of all, is that correct?
So if you're only looking to brew like one potion, or if you've got a couple of people in the party working on it, you can brew more. You can do that as part of a long rest. But you already need to be disengaging from. You need to back up, find a safe space for you and your party to rest. So you can do that as part of a long rest during the middle of an adventure. That only gets you like one important potion.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay, so it's a quantity output thing. It's not the amount of time it takes, it's quantity output. But it also sounds like it's a little flexible. If I wanted to make it more like Baldur's Gate, because my players enjoyed that, where they just can make more potions more frequently, that would be customizable pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, pretty easily. You could swap that out to be, you could say that instead of it being a campcraft activity that you do as part of a long rest, you can instead say this is something your character could do over a short rest. If that's something, if you want that faster pace or that higher potion count in your game,
Okay.
you can absolutely change that down to a short rest.
Got it. There are little factors I can, like little strings I can pull on if I want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're all about giving the levers over to the GM to decide exactly how much they want this to impact their game.
Cool. All right. Switching gears a little bit, tell me one of your favorite, maybe outlandish or wild potions that came up, say during playtesting, or that's in the book as an example, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
More than one is fine too.
So yeah, absolutely. We've got my favorite potion that's probably come up during our testing so far has been the potion of particular place, which we have in mind to be like a druid who's traveling on a long journey with their party. They can take this potion out and combine it with some soil from the region, and then mix it up, gulp it down, and they can learn information about the land that's around them. You know, how healthy is the land? What are the animals like? What are the dangers that are being posed to the land around them? You know, it's not a particularly like outlandish or powerful thing, but it's a nice way for a player to be like, I want to find out about the land and start to care for it. Yeah, that sort of role for a druid or a ranger just feels very natural to us.
Yeah, it doesn't have a high wacky coolness factor, but it's really unique and it feels grounded in the world. I really like that. I don't often feel like I'm in a real place. I don't often feel like I have the players in a real fleshed out place in D&D, and that might help that type of thing a little bit too. In touch with the land.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the second that you cross into the desert, you take a handful of sand, you mix it in, and it's just like, oh yeah, snake population doing great.
Nice. The Ranger's Dream potion, it sounds like.
Exactly. Lovely.
Cool.
I have to say, I quite like that one. Probably one of the coolest like poisons we have going on in this would be the poison of inner fire. It's sort of like a delayed fire burst thing where you have to inflict like a weapon on it, and then after a few moments, the target begins to just sort of like erupt. They got flames going on all over them.
Wow.
It's a lot more obvious than a lot of other poisons. You know, that murder mystery is not going to take a lot to solve.
Could you make it look like the very rare spontaneous human combustion, which is a real thing? Google it, friends.
Absolutely. No, it's definitely one for the rogues who are trying to send a message. Not trying to.
Nice. This is what happens if you mess with the family.
Yeah. To whom it may concern.
That's great. Those are quite colorful. And again, I'm getting the feeling that this is sort of like a smorgasbord of components. It's hard to come up with ideas that different on your own, just browsing things for inspiration.
Honestly, we've had a great team of writers working on this. They've really put a lot of work into coming up with some really like out there but still practical magic items and potions. We're really happy with how this is all starting to come together.
Cool. Is there any parallel to? I'm just grasping at straws, looking for you to talk about cool things now. Is there like some outlandish? I keep saying outlandish. It's not really the word I want. Mind-blowing take on alchemist fire, something that explodes but in a new and different way.
So that explodes but in a new and different way. Well, we do have something that explodes in a new and different way, where if you decide that all of the potions that you have in this book and all the recipes all the like dice results we've given you for all of the potions that exist in the core rules, if that isn't enough for you, you can decide, I want to try and combine some of these effects. So I want a potion that does a bit of this, that does a bit of the poison of inner fire, but I want it to have this effect from this other potion. So I want it to be like an inner freezing potion. You can then try and mix and combine them to do a combination effect. And there is a non-zero chance of that blowing up in your face. Magic and alchemy is unstable.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so you could get hurt. This could backfire on you.
No,
You could
no,
get hoisted
water
on your own
puts out
magical
fire.
petard. Yeah,
Exactly.
interesting. Oh,
Water
so
puts
if
out
I
fire,
wanted
but
to,
hydrogen and oxygen both explode.
oh wow. All right, I'm having more of Dave's wild ideas. What if I want to create something that, when thrown, it's some alchemical substance that, when thrown, glass breaks, moves outward. Whoever it hits is frozen in place. But if they take bludgeoning damage, they explode or
If they
shatter. Let's
bludgeoning
say
damage.
shatter. Yeah,
Okay. So we do have a
super
full
lethal.
category. So to sort of like split up the sort of types of effects that you could want, we've sort of split up all of our potions into 3 categories.
Mhm.
That'd be potions, which is stuff that you consume for yourself to feel better. Poisons, stuff that you give to someone else to make them feel worse. And explosions, something you throw away and it hurts an area.
Right.
And we've got a few different like explosives that would all deal with sort of hit an area and that blasts out. We've got the potion of sap, amber sap, I think, that does stick and bind people into a location. And I'm sure there's definitely more than one potion out there, either in the core rules or in the rules that we've supplied, that you could mix with it to create that shatter effect.
Neat. Okay. So you are undaunted by any of my wacky questions. I'm like embracing my inner 5-year-old here. Like, what if it was birds, but they blew up? And you're not batting an eye, which is great. It gives me confidence.
Absolutely. A forever GM has to be ready for the unpredictable.
That's right.
I've read this. I've read these books quite a lot. As much of these as as we're going through the final testing and editing and stuff.
Yeah.
I've read through a lot of these, so I hope I'd be familiar.
Okay, great. Anything else you want to tell us about Mortar and Pestle specifically?
Anything about Mortar Pestle? Well, I think there's probably only one thing that left with Mortar Pestle that I think would be worth noting is that we've dedicated like a whole chapter to just like shopkeeper type NPCs. These are going to be quest givers that you as a GM can drop into your game as an attempt to try and bridge the players into this new system. So this could be a new alchemist has moved into town, or it's someone that you've just found out lives in that tower over there, who has the secrets of how alchemy works, or has a shop where they sell specific potions. And you can just introduce this new character, and your players can now get integrated into this alchemy system. So as that way you can get it onboarded into your game with as little friction as possible.
Are you saying this is how they learn to do alchemy, or that this is a resource where they can go to and this person can do stuff that's in the book, or both?
I think we're leaning on both. That this person can be commissioned to do potions, or you can go to this person to learn how to make potions, or you can just buy stuff from them. And importantly, we're making sure that all of them have got quests and stuff that you can go on to go with them, so that we can say, so this specific Dragonborn smuggler is somebody who's always able to find weird ingredients if you ask them nicely and have enough money. But if you ever earn their ire, they happen to have contacts in the Thieves Guild. And every time you get to the Thieves Guild, they've got this weird poison that always messes up your party for some reason.
So alchemy itself becomes part of the story dynamic.
Exactly.
Really
We're hoping that the way that you interact with these NPCs will reflect, it'll have ripple effects on your game. You'll be able to see the after effects of this, in as many adventures as your GM wants.
That's cool. So it takes it beyond, not that there's anything wrong with having crafting by itself, but in a sense, it can take it beyond this sort of like video gamey thing where, I put all the ingredients in the box and click the thing and I have it. Who cares? Like it could take it beyond that in terms of story impact, which is something I always appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. Thank you again, Josh Corcoran, coming to us all the way from Ireland today, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much for having me, David.
Yeah, appreciate your time, appreciate your enthusiasm. And for our viewers who want to learn a little bit more about another 5e publication that Cubicle 7 did that also fills in some gaps in 5e, in this case, downtime activities and how to make them interesting and actually give you things you can use in the game, check out our video for A Life Well Lived, which is linked on your screen right now, and almost a companion book to these two books. We've mentioned it several times already in the video. They work together, so it might be something our viewers are also interested in. But again, thanks for your time, and thanks everybody for watching.